In today's video, do you really need a teacher? Hello, Michael here from Making Music, and today we are talking about whether you should get yourself a teacher. Now listen, right from the beginning, I'm going to hold my hands up and say I'm biased. I have been teaching for 20 years, so yeah, has that influenced my opinion a little bit? You're right, it has, and I'll show you my opinion on some of the reasons why people give for not wanting to get a teacher. We're going to talk about why you should, a couple of other examples of what is out there. It is the 21st century, so you know, maybe there's apps or internet and other things you can use. And I'm going to leave you a couple of stories and a top tip as always, but it's a bit of a twist on it this week, so stay tuned for that one, okay? You know the drill. Before we get into it, there's a million more ways to play music, a million more ways to go about it. My advice is based on my education, bachelor's degree from Trinity, master's degree from Royal College, and I've been teaching and playing professionally for over 20 years. I hope you find something you like. Please take it, run with it. That would be great. If you don't find anything, that's okay too. Whatever you do, please leave me a comment. Let me know your thoughts, like the video and subscribe. Okay, now this is a mega big subject. I'm not going to be able to cover everything off. I'm just pick what I think are some of the main points. I know as soon as I post this video, I'm going to be thinking, oh, I knew I should have done that. That should have included that point. So forgive me for that. I'm sure we can do a follow-up video. Let me know what you want me to cover off. So, you have decided you want to play an instrument, and that is wonderful. There's lots of benefits from mental health and what have you, so good for you. But do you really need to get yourself a teacher? Well, you're going to hate me for saying this, but it really depends on your goals. I'd say most of the time, yes, 9 times out of 10, you probably should get yourself a teacher, but sometimes you probably get away with not doing it. So if your goal is to play Wonderwall by Oasis, you know, I'm not saying it's a bad song, it's a nice little song, but it's not the most challenging technically ever in the world. So you could probably get away with, you know, not getting a teacher to teach you how to play Wonderwall. If you want to be an orchestral musician, on the other hand, I would say you're going to need to get yourself a teacher. I can't actually think of a single person that I've ever played an orchestra with that haven't had a teacher at some point. So the likelihood is you will need to get a teacher for that. Okay, so orchestral instruments, everyone seems to have a get a teacher, but with the piano and with the guitar, people somehow think they can go it alone. They're actually quite challenging technically speaking, those instruments, but somehow they think they can go it alone. And I'm going to talk about why I think that's not the best idea. Now listen, when you're starting out something new, okay, and you've decided that you are not going to get yourself a teacher, it is the equivalent of me blindfolding you, driving for half an hour, taking you out the car, spinning you around 14 times in the pitch black and saying, okay, find your way home. It's just pure trial and error. So you might be blind going this way, go, oh, okay. But you're not, oh, you hear funny voices over there, not going that way. Oh, that's uphill, I don't like that either. What about, do you get my point? You're going to be trying out a lot of different things and they're not all going to work. Whereas at least with a teacher, they'll be able to grab you by the hand and lead you in the right direction. Okay? They'll also be able to show you when you know your technique is not quite right and other ways of doing it, things that will hold you back. So just bear that in mind. You know, the idea is that they pass on the knowledge to you that they have built up themselves, but also been taught themselves before. It's like, was it Isaac Newton that said the only reason why he'd seen further is because he'd stood on the shoulder of giants. Stand on your teacher's shoulders, metaphorically speaking, of course. Don't actually go standing on their shoulder, that'd be a bit weird. And yeah, and you will look further. You'll be able to make more progress quickly. Anyway, let's talk about some of the reasons that people give for not wanting to get a teacher. Okay. I'm going to start with what is probably the biggest reason, but people often don't say it's the biggest reason, and that is price, money. It's not the cheapest thing to have a lesson with you know, a one-to-one lesson for an hour with a qualified professional teacher with a lot of experience. No, it's not the most expensive, but it's not that expensive either. You can make a few little adjustments in your lifestyle and you can quite easily probably afford an hour lesson or a half-hour lesson weekly, possibly bi-weekly. I would really stay clear of monthly because there's too big a time gap between. But if you can do weekly or even bi-weekly, that would So I don't think it's a really good reason to say price, because what the teacher will do will save you the biggest, the most valuable commodity that we have, and that is time. Again, like I said, if you're blindfolded and you don't know where you're going and it's pitch black, it'd be good to have just some light to show you the right direction, wouldn't it? Okay, so that's the first one. The second one is a rather strange one, and that is, oh, I don't want a teacher to stifle my creativity. I want to develop my own style, man. Look, I've never met two people that play the same way. Never. There's similarities, yes, but everyone is influenced by somebody else. If you want a completely true, unique style, you ain't gonna get it, because you're gonna have influences from music you've heard, other people you've heard play. So having a teacher is just another influence. It's not gonna stifle your creativity. It's nonsense. And you know, the only thing I can think of is that you get sometimes this idea that classical players, particularly, because the vast majority of classical players will have been taught by a teacher, you know, that they are too rigid in their playing. If all you've ever played is Mozart string quartets, and that's or Beethoven sonatas or anything like that, you will have developed your style to play that type of music. If someone then tells you, improvise some jazz for me, they're like, I've never done this before. Of course they're going to sound more rigid, in inverted commas, than a jazz player who's been improvising for years and years and years. But that doesn't mean their creativity's been stifled. No, it's just they haven't done that before. So that's, no, just no. You're not going to stifle your creativity. The other one which people say will sometimes stifle their creativity is they don't want to learn to read and write music. Again, complete nonsense. It is just a form of communication. That's all it is. Do you really think Shakespeare said, I'm not going to bother with that alphabet nonsense because I don't want it to affect my creativity? I don't want to be straitjacketed by letters. Come on, people. No, no, and no. I know there's pop musicians, rock musicians out there that say, oh, you know, I don't read music. Do they or don't they? I think they probably do something, i.e. they probably write chord symbols or something like that. So they are actually writing it down to some extent, but reading, writing manuscript is so much more sophisticated than just a bunch of chord symbols. Plus you're able to actually write melody rather than just, you know, and the rhythm as well, represent that properly on a manuscript, whereas you wouldn't be able to do that with chord symbols and just letters on a page. It doesn't work in the same way, okay? So again, there's nothing wrong with learning to read music. And all those people who say, oh, I don't read music, do you not think they would have benefited a little bit from having been able to do it? I'd suggest they probably would have done. They'd be able to write their little ideas much quicker if they could do it, okay? So that's, you know, the main things. And it's almost like being self-taught is like a badge of honor. Oh, you know, I'm self-taught, you know. Rock stars are, yeah, no, never had a lesson in my life, no. Really? So no one's ever showed you how to play anything before? You probably had a lot of teachers here, there and everywhere. And I might like to say that rock stars and pop stars and everything is not really a true reflection of real life. For every one rock star, pop star that exists, there's probably another million people out there who tried but never made it. And also, it's not always about pure talent in that industry. It's more about the product, if you know what I mean. So what's going to sell rather than who is technically speaking a better player. Okay. Moving on, I know there's a lot of people who are probably thinking that we now live in the 21st century, Michael. Come on, do we really need to have a teacher with us in the room? I mean, there's apps these days. I'm sure I'll be covering some of those off in the future. There's so much information online, tutorials on YouTube, even how to play certain songs and everything like that. So what do you really need a teacher for? You're just wasting... No, and no. Look, I'll be looking at some of these apps in more detail and at some point, I know that, but the main reason why apps and internet, the stuff that you read online, falls down, the two main reasons. Number one, it can't hear you playing properly, Okay? Yes, I've seen some apps that actually say, oh, they can hear you playing, they can tell you whether you're making a mistake or not. But this is the same technology that will also tell you whether you're singing in tune. So you might be singing a note like this. You're still singing in tune, but it's not a very nice sound, if that makes sense. So major, they're not going to hear it like a proper human ear. And the second thing is, it will not correct your technique. Okay, and this is one of the main things. Having somebody in the room with you, they'll be able to guide you and correct you in real time. So if they see your technique starting to go in slightly the wrong way, they're going to save you that time by not having gone all the way down that road by using that wrong technique. Bring you back, start on the right path. Okay, it becomes very difficult to correct something that has been ingrained in somebody. I know I suffered from it myself. I had one teacher that didn't correct some of my technique. I think he was a little bit out of depth, but that doesn't matter. And it wasn't until I got my teacher afterwards that we really had to work very hard to correct it. So I know you could then argue as well, bad teachers not better. But yeah, that's a whole nother video. But yeah, look, the point is, a good teacher will be able to correct you, technically speaking, and make sure you're making the right amounts of progress. Now, the other thing that a regular lesson with a teacher gives you is motivation. You might be the most motivated person in the world. That's fine, you don't need that, okay? I suspect that most of us aren't, okay? So if you have a regular appointment with your teacher, a regular lesson on a weekly basis, for instance, you have that goal every single week that you know you're going to need to make progress towards. So that's really going to help to keep that motivation going. If you're just on your own, it just becomes a case of, oh, I'll do it tomorrow. Well, you can't do it tomorrow because you've got a lesson tomorrow. But if you're on your own, you don't have a lesson tomorrow, so you can do it tomorrow. So your progress is never going to be as much. Well, unlikely to be as much, let's put it that way, okay? So now, story time. I'll give you two stories. Try not to go over the top with them, so forgive me if I waffle a little bit, but two stories about people being self-taught. So I started teaching in one school, it must have been 2004. Anyway, and they were really proud of some of the students that playing the piano. Now this was what we call, I mean, they class themselves as an inner city school. So, you know, a lot of the kids in this school were not from, what would you say, affluent families. A lot of them were on free school meals that happen here in the UK. So when the income of a household is, I believe, of a certain level, then they qualify for getting free food at the school. But I mean, obviously that, you know, just because it's an inner city school doesn't mean it wasn't a good school. There's some great teachers there, some great kids there as well. But there was this group of boys, and their thing was playing the piano. So I know, you know, with your group of friends from school, you know, it may have been sports, whatever sport that you all were into. It may have been video game, it may have been something. But these guys, they're really into their piano playing, which is great. And there were three of them that really stood out in particular. The others were pretty good. They could play a few bits, but these three were really, you know, they were, for what they'd done exceptionally well. And they were all self-taught, but they kind of taught each other, if that makes sense. So, but anyway, so they're all self-taught, and obviously the headmaster was very proud of them. You know, saying, "Man, we've got great piano players here at this school." You know, so when I was brought in to teach them piano for their GCSEs, it was you know, well, you're a very lucky guy, Mike, coming in here teaching our fantastic players. Yeah, great. And I can remember the very first time I met all three of them. They came into the room, and they were very nice, very polite young men, and one guy, he was I won't name them by name, but I think you three will know who you are. So hi, if you're watching, leave me a comment, get in touch. One guy, he was really into Beethoven sonatas, okay, and he was working on the third movement of the Moonlight Sonata, which could be quite tricky in certain places. It's not horrendously difficult, but it's, you know, it's up there, it's post-grade A, let's put it that way. And he played it, and I can remember, you know, there's a lot of very good things in that, but what he was doing is he put the pedal on the piano, and he just kept it down for long periods of time, which meant that the whole room was like a wash of sound. The piano was just you couldn't hear clearly what, you know, the music was. And he was like, yeah, it's great, isn't it? So, yeah, no, you've done some really good stuff on that. And considering they never had a lesson, they've done really, really well. But okay, so I said to him, look, okay, that's great. Now play it again, but take the pedal off. He looked at me a bit funny, like, yeah, but I need the pedal. Why? Okay. So he tried it again, and he just went, oh, but it doesn't sound right. So I know it doesn't sound right, because we're going to need to go take a step back. We're going to need to look at what you're doing. The notes are not even enough. There's a couple of techniques I can show you for that, and a couple of exercises for that. We need to work on that pedaling. I'm not saying you shouldn't use pedal for this particular movement, but we're going to need to look at where we use it and how much of it we're using as well. Anyway, look, these three boys, they were always going to pass their GCSEs, and they did. They got their A's for their performance, which is obviously what I was brought in to do, and they got it, and that was fantastic. They probably could have done it anyway, but some of the others obviously needed a bit more help, which I was obviously happy to do. But yeah, it was interesting to see, you know, just how far you actually can get if you have that motivation around you and everything. But also, it goes back to what I was saying before, that a teacher will be able to give, you know, save you a lot of time and a lot of heartache in the end, because of not having to correct technique further down the line when you're already so far down the line that it's become ingrained in you. Okay, it would be great if I could have taught those boys from an earlier age, 4 or 5 years earlier. But of course, who knows? Who knows? Hindsight is a wonderful thing, isn't it? And then the other story I wanted to share with you is me. So I'm sure you've all figured out I am not self-taught, right? I am classically trained pianist and bassoonist, and that's what I studied at music college, as I said earlier in the video. So, but I do also play guitar and bass guitar. Not that much really, to be honest, I don't even have one, but I do play guitar a little bit, and I like to dabble a little bit. But I've never really had a proper lesson, okay? Now, you might think I'm being a bit of a hypocrite here, but I'll promise you I'm not, because what I did with that is basically I took to the guitar later on in school, and I was listening to one guy who was playing More Than Words by Extreme, and I really liked the way he played it, so I asked him to show me. So he, in effect, taught me how to play that. Then after that, there were some other things I started to get into, more guitar music. I've never particularly liked Metallica, but suddenly you start to hear things in a different light, and you go, actually no, that More Than Words song, no, Nothing Else Matters, sorry, Nothing Else Matters, that's actually not bad either. So I found some guitar magazines, bought them from the shop, and it was notated, so I was able to read it, and bit by bit I started to play. The thing was, I used what I'd learned on both piano and on the bassoon, technically speaking, to help me. I know it's different, obviously you're holding your hands like this, you're holding your hands like this or like this, so, but a lot of them have got transferable skills, transferable techniques. So I was able to pick that up. However, it goes back to what was my goal on the guitar. My goal on the guitar was not to be the next Prince or Jimi Hendrix or anything. It was just to play, you know, just to play a few songs which I really liked. And the more and more I played, the more I was able to develop. And I did seek out a few, what would you call them? Informal type lessons with players who were better than myself. So was I self-taught? Yeah, no, maybe. But that's probably an example where, you know, a teacher is probably not 100% necessary. I would have made a lot more progress, absolutely, but my focus was always the piano and the bassoon, really, in terms of practicing anyway. Right, and that's the end of our story, and I'm going to leave you with a top tip. As I said, there's a bit of a twist on it this week. So the top tip for you this week is more of a saying, really, and more. I really, when I first heard this, I really took it to heart, and I've tried to live by it ever since. Now, I don't know where it's from. I cannot remember where I read it. It wasn't a book. So if you know where it comes from, please do let me know. Leave me notes in the comments. But it goes something along the lines of like this. The beginner knows everything, but the professional is always looking for ways to improve. So the beginner knows everything, but the professional is always looking for ways to improve. Okay, I'm going to leave you with that. Thank you so much for watching. Please leave me a comment. Please like the video and subscribe. I hope you found something useful there, and I hope to see you next time. Bye for now.